Daddy, how much does a boy cost? Caleb Thornton's boots stopped dead in the snow. His daughter Rosie was pointing at something behind the livestock pen. He turned, and his chest caved in. A boy, maybe 9 years old, stood on a wooden crate with a rope around his waist. No coat, no shoes, blood frozen on his face. A man in a black coat held the rope like a leash and was shouting prices to a crowd that watched and did nothing. Caleb's hand went to his revolver. His daughter was already running toward the boy. If you want to follow this story to the very end, subscribe to my channel and hit that bell so you never miss a moment. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. December 14th, 1887. Burden Creek, Colorado. Rosie, stop. Caleb caught her arm before she got 10 feet. Stop right now. But Daddy, they're hurting him. I know, but you stay behind me. You hear me? Behind me. She nodded, her chin shaking. Caleb pulled her close and moved through the crowd. His bad leg burned with every step, that old Antietam souvenir reminding him that heroes were just fools who hadn't died yet. The man in the black coat was still talking. Smooth voice, the kind that sold snake oil and salvation with the same smile. Strong boy, good worker, been with me 3 years, eats nothing, complains less. Who'll start at $15? $15 for a child. The crowd shuffled. Some looked away. Most didn't. 20, someone called from the back. A rancher Caleb didn't recognize. Thick neck, mean eyes. $20. Fine start. Do I hear 25? Caleb stopped 6 feet from the crate. The boy stood there shaking, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere past the same eyes he'd seen in the field hospitals after Antietam. Men who'd already left their bodies and were just waiting for permission to die. 30, Caleb said. The crowd turned. The man in the black coat looked at him. Up close, Caleb could see a scar running down the man's left cheek, pale and thick, like someone had tried to open his face with a knife years back. $30 from the gentleman. Do I hear 35? I ain't buying him, Caleb's voice carried across the square. I'm asking you to take that rope off him before I do it myself. The silence that followed was the kind that comes before gunfire. The scarred man smiled. This boy is my legal ward, friend. Got papers signed by Judge Harlan in Denver. I'm his guardian, and I decide what happens to him. Guardians don't sell children in the street like cattle. Who says I'm selling? I'm finding him proper placement, a work home. Good, honest labor for a boy who'd otherwise starve. He's already starving. Caleb nodded at the boy. When's the last time you fed him? The boy eats fine. Rosie stepped out from behind Caleb. He grabbed for her and missed. She walked straight up to the crate, pulled the peppermint stick from her coat pocket, the one she'd been saving all week, and held it up to the boy. Here, it's peppermint. It's really good. The boy looked down at her. Something moved behind those empty eyes, just barely, like a candle flame in a room everyone thought was dark. His hand crept forward, slow, trembling, fingers raw and cracked. He took the candy and held it like it might explode. Rosie, Caleb's voice was tight. Come back here. He's cold, Daddy. He doesn't have a coat. I know, baby. Come back here. She didn't move. Instead, she looked up at the scarred man with her mother's gray eyes, and her voice came out clear as a church bell in the frozen air. You're mean to him. I can tell. He's scared of you. The scarred man's smile disappeared. Little girl, you should teach your daughter some manners, Mackenzie. How do you know my name? Small town. I know everybody's name. The man wound the rope tighter around his fist. Now, unless you're here to bid, step aside. I've got business. Your business is over. Says who? Says me. Caleb unfastened the leather strap on his holster. Not drawing, not yet, but making sure everyone saw. You gonna shoot me over a stray? The man laughed. In front of your little girl? In front of this whole town? I'm gonna ask you one more time to take that rope off the boy. After that, I stop asking. The rancher in the back called out. Just let him have the kid, mister. Ain't worth the trouble. Shut up, Caleb said without turning around. The scarred man studied Caleb. His eyes went to the holster, to Caleb's hand resting near the grip, to the limp that meant a war wound, to the look in Caleb's eyes that said this was a man who'd killed before and hadn't enjoyed it, but hadn't hesitated either. Name's Mordecai Slade. The man's voice dropped low, just for Caleb. Remember it, because you're going to hear it again. He unwound the rope from his fist and let it drop. The boy swayed on the crate, almost fell. Caleb caught him with one arm. The child weighed nothing. Bones wrapped in skin and held together by something too stubborn to be called hope. I'll be back for what's mine, Mackenzie. Slade turned and walked toward the edge of the square, where two men waited on horses. One tall and thin, one short and heavy, both armed. Caleb watched them ride out. Then he looked down at the boy in his arm. Up close, it was worse. Bruises layered on bruises, cuts that had scarred over and been cut again, and around his neck, finger-shaped bruises, purple and fresh. Someone had choked this child within the last few days. Daddy, Rosie tugged his coat. Daddy, can we take him home? Rosie, it ain't that simple. Why not? Because... He stopped. Because why? Because it was dangerous? Because Slade would come for the boy? Because Caleb had spent 5 years building walls around his heart after Martha died, and this child was about to walk straight through them? Because I got one good coat, and now it's on him, Caleb said, and I'm freezing. So let's get inside before we all turn to ice. Rosie smiled. The boy didn't. Clara Jennings had the door open before they reached the porch. 50 years old, arms like a blacksmith, heart like a cathedral. Saw the whole thing from my window. She pulled them inside. Caleb Thornton, you are either the bravest man in Colorado or the dumbest, and I ain't decided which. Can I decide after I get warm? Sit him by the stove. Rosie, blankets, top shelf, the wool ones. Rosie ran. Clara was already heating broth. Caleb set the boy in the chair by the stove. The child sat rigid, his hands gripping the seat like he expected someone to rip it away. You got a name, son? Nothing. The boy stared at the floor. He don't have to talk, Clara said from the stove. Give him time. Time's the one thing we might not have. Slade said he's coming back. Mordecai Slade is a snake in a suit. Been hearing things about that mine of his for 2 years. Children going in, not coming out. But he's got money and papers and friends in Denver, so nobody says a word. Somebody's saying a word now. Clara looked at him, hard. You got a 7-year-old daughter, Caleb. You think about that before you go picking fights with men like Slade. I'm thinking about her. Caleb nodded toward Rosie, who was dragging a blanket twice her size across the room. What kind of father would I be if I taught her to look the other way when a child's being sold in the street? Clara's mouth opened, then closed. She turned back to the stove and stirred the broth harder than necessary. Rosie draped the blanket around the boy's shoulders. There, that's better, right? The boy's fingers curled into the wool. His whole body was shaking, not from cold anymore, from something deeper. The trembling of a body that hadn't felt safe in so long, it had forgotten how. I'm Rosie. I'm 7. That's my daddy. His name is Caleb, but everyone calls him Mr. Thornton. except me and Clara and Doc Whitfield and Reverend Calloway. We have a ranch with horses and chickens and a dog named Biscuit. He's old and fat, and he sleeps on your feet." The boy stared at her, like she was speaking a language from a country he'd never visited. "Do you like dogs?" Rosie asked. A pause. Then, so quiet, it was almost nothing. "Never met one." "Never met a dog?" Rosie's eyes went wide. "Daddy, he's never met a dog." "I heard him. We have to fix that. Biscuit is the best dog in the whole world. He'll love you. He loves everybody except the mailman." Something happened in the boy's face. A crack. Tiny. Like ice breaking on a pond in early spring. Not a smile. Not close to a smile. But the ghost of something that might have been one a long time ago. Clara brought the broth, set it down in front of the boy. "Drink it slow. Your stomach ain't used to food. Drink too fast, and it'll all come back up." The boy lifted the cup with both hands, shaking so hard the broth sloshed. He took one sip, and his eyes closed, just for a second. And in that second, the emptiness left his face and was replaced by something so raw and desperate that Caleb had to look away. "What's your name, son?" he tried again. The boy opened his eyes, looked at Caleb, then at Rosie, then at Clara. Measuring, calculating, running the math that every abused child runs. Is this real? Will it last? What's the price? "Noah." Barely a whisper. "Noah Ward." "Noah, that's a good name." "Mr." Noah's hand tightened on the cup. "That man, Mr. Slade. He'll come for me. He always does. He's got papers, legal papers. Says he owns me." "Nobody owns you." "The judge says different." "Then the judge is wrong." Noah shook his head. "You don't understand. He's got 22 other kids up there. If you make him angry, he takes it out on them. On my—" He stopped, swallowed. His eyes went to the floor. "He takes it out on the others." Caleb heard the catch, the word Noah had almost said, and pulled back. My what? My brother? My sister? My friend? Someone specific. Someone Noah was protecting even now, even here, even while he bled and starved. Noah, who's still up there. The boy's jaw locked. His knuckles went white around the cup. "I can't. If I tell you and he finds out, they'll get hurt worse." "All right," Caleb held up his hands. "All right, you don't have to tell me. Not now." Clara caught his eye across the room and shook her head slightly. "Don't push. Let it come." The front door opened, and Dr. Agnes Whitfield walked in. Silver hair, sharp eyes, medical bag in hand. She took one look at Noah, and her mouth pressed into a thin, hard line. "Clara sent Rosie's friend Tommy running to my office 5 minutes ago." She set her bag on the table. "Let me see him." "Doc, he's scared. Go easy." "I've been going easy on scared children since before you could shave, Caleb Thornton. Don't tell me my business." Agnes pulled a chair close to Noah. She didn't touch him, just sat there, hands visible, voice low. "I'm Dr. Whitfield. I'm going to check if you're hurt. I won't do anything you don't want me to do. You say stop, I stop. Understand?" Noah nodded, barely. The examination took 15 minutes. Agnes was thorough, but gentle, and with every inch of skin she uncovered, her expression went darker. Caleb stood by the window. Rosie sat on Clara's lap, her face buried in Clara's shoulder. When Agnes finished, she helped Noah back into his shirt and pulled Caleb outside. "How bad?" Agnes's voice was ice. 3 ribs cracked and healed wrong. Rope burns scarred over on both wrists. Lash marks across his back. I counted 37. Burns on his feet. And Caleb? Someone choked that boy hard enough to leave handprints. Within the last week. Can you document it? I've been documenting it since I walked in the door. Every scar, every fracture, every mark. 12 pages by the time I'm done. If this goes in front of any judge with half a conscience, Slade's finished. What if the judge doesn't have half a conscience? Agnes looked at him. Then God help us all. They went back inside. Noah had finished the broth. Rosie had escaped Clara's lap and was sitting beside him again, talking about Biscuit, about the ranch, about Christmas coming. "Do you know about Christmas?" Rosie asked. "I know what it is." "Do you know about presents?" "No." "Daddy gets me one every year. Last year I got a book about horses. And Clara made me a dress. And Reverend Calloway gave me a Bible with my name on it. This year, I'm going to ask for something different." "What?" Rosie looked at her father, then back at Noah. "A brother." The room went quiet. Clara's hand stopped stirring. Agnes looked up from her notes. Caleb felt something crack inside his chest. Not break. Crack. The way ice cracks before the river starts flowing again. Noah stared at Rosie. "You don't want me as a brother. I'm trouble. Mr. Slade says I'm trouble. Says nobody wants me. Says that's why my ma died and my pa left, because I wasn't worth staying for." "Mr. Slade is a liar," Rosie said. "And liars are bad. Daddy says so." "Your daddy doesn't know. My daddy knows everything. Right, Daddy?" Caleb looked at his daughter, 7 years old, with Martha's fierce heart and Martha's stubborn jaw. Then he looked at Noah, this broken child who'd been sold in the street like livestock an hour ago. And he felt the war inside himself, the one he'd been fighting since Martha died. Stay safe. Stay small. Don't love anyone else, because everyone you love dies or disappears. But Martha's voice was in his head. The same thing she'd said the night before Lucy was born, when Caleb had confessed he was terrified of being a father. "You don't have to be perfect, Caleb. You just have to show up." "No," Caleb said quietly. "I don't know everything. But I know you're not trouble, Noah. And I know that man had no right to do what he did to you. And I know you're coming home with us tonight." Noah's cup clattered against the table. "What?" "You heard me. But Slade, let me worry about Slade. He's got men. He's got guns. He's got the law. And I've got a spare bed and a dog that sleeps on your feet." Caleb held out his hand. "That enough for now?" Noah looked at the hand. Caleb could see the calculation running behind those dark eyes. Every adult who'd ever reached for him had hurt him. Every hand that had been offered had been a trap. Every promise had been a lie. Rosie put her hand on top of Caleb's. "We're nice, I promise. Daddy burns the biscuits sometimes and Clara yells at him for it, but we're nice." "I don't burn them that often," Caleb said. "You burned them yesterday." "That was one time." "And Tuesday. The stove runs hot." Clara snorted from across the room. "The stove runs fine. You just can't cook." Something happened then. Small. Almost invisible. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not even close, but a movement. A fracture in the wall. A single brick shifting in a fortress that had taken 4 years to build. He reached out and put his hand in Caleb's. The boy's fingers were ice cold, raw, trembling. Caleb closed his hand around them gently, felt the fragile bones, the roughened skin, the pulse hammering fast as a rabbit's heartbeat. "All right then," Caleb said. "Let's go home." Clara had already packed a bundle. Coat, boots, hat, gloves, all pulled from the donation trunk she kept for folks in need. She dressed Noah with quick, practical hands while she talked. This coat belonged to Mrs. Henderson's boy before he outgrew it. Good wool. Keep you warm through anything. Boots might be a half size big, but we'll stuff the toes with cloth. Better too big than too small. Noah took each item like it was made of gold. When Clara buttoned the coat and pulled the hat down over his ears, the boy's eyes filled. He blinked hard, fighting it. Nobody's ever... His voice broke. Well, somebody is now. Clara straightened the coat collar. And if that snake Slade shows up at my door, he'll get a face full of cast-iron skillet. You tell him I said so. Agnes handed Caleb a folded paper. Preliminary findings. I'll have the full report by morning. Caleb, what you're doing is right. But it's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. It's going to get worse. Slade won't let this go. Neither will I. They walked out into the cold. Snow was falling again, thick and steady, covering the tracks where Slade had stood an hour ago. Caleb lifted Rosie into the wagon, then turned to Noah. The boy stood on Clara's porch, wrapped in his new coat, staring at the wagon like it was a ship sailing to a country he'd only heard about in stories. A country where people were kind, and beds were warm, and nobody tied ropes around your waist. Can you climb up? Noah tried. His legs buckled on the second step. Caleb caught him, lifted him, set him on the bench beside Rosie. The boy weighed almost nothing. Rosie pulled the blanket across both their laps. Biscuit's gonna love you so much, Noah. He's fat and he smells bad after it rains, but he's the best. I've never had a dog. You have one now. Caleb climbed up, took the reins, clicked his tongue. The horses started forward. Burden Creek fell away behind them. The prairie stretched ahead, white and wide and silent under the falling snow. They rode without talking for a while. Rosie leaned against Caleb's arm. Noah sat rigid, his eyes scanning the horizon the way a hunted animal watches for movement. Noah? Yes, sir? You don't have to call me sir. What do I call you? Caleb thought about that. Caleb works for now. Yes, sir. Caleb. Better. More silence. The snow thickened. The wagon creaked through drifts. Caleb. Yeah? That man, Slade. He's going to come. I know. He won't come alone. I know that too. And he's got legal papers. A judge signed them. You can't fight papers. Watch me. Noah went quiet. His hands twisted in his lap, working at the edge of the blanket. Then, barely audible over the creak of the wagon and the wind. I have a brother. Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. Tell me. His name's Eli. He's 13. He's still up there. At the mine. We'll get him out. You can't promise that. I just did. But, Noah. Caleb turned to look at the boy. Snow in his hair, tears on his cheeks, fear in every line of his thin body. I lost people I should have fought for. A long time ago. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Your brother's coming home. You've got my word. Noah held his gaze, searching for the lie, the trap, the betrayal that always came. He didn't find it. The boy turned back to the road. His hand crept across the bench and found Rosie's. She took it without a word, laced her fingers through his, like they'd been doing this their whole lives. They rode on through the snow, 3 people bound together by a choice made in the span of a heartbeat. Behind them, Burden Creek disappeared into the white. Ahead, the ranch waited, and somewhere in the mountains to the west, in a mine shaft where children worked in darkness, a 13-year-old boy named Eli was still alive. Caleb didn't know if he could keep his promise, didn't know if the law would help or destroy them, didn't know if Slade would come with lawyers or guns or both. But his daughter was holding a stranger's hand like he was already family. And a boy who'd forgotten how to hope had just trusted him with a name. That was enough to start. The ranch came into view just as the last light bled out of the sky. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and helped Rosie down first. She hit the ground running, calling for Biscuit, her voice cutting through the cold air like a bell. The old hound came lumbering around the side of the cabin, fat, slow, ears dragging, tail going like a metronome. He headed straight for Rosie, then caught a new scent and changed course. He planted himself in front of the wagon and looked up at Noah with the serious expression of a dog conducting official business. Noah hadn't moved from the bench. He was staring at the cabin, at the barn, at the smoke curling from the chimney where the banked fire still held. Staring like a man dying of thirst who'd been shown a river and didn't believe it was real. "That's Biscuit," Rosie said. "He won't bite. He doesn't even have enough teeth left to bite." "He's got plenty of teeth," Caleb said. "He just doesn't use them on people." "He tried to eat a pine cone last week." "That's between him and the pine cone." Caleb reached up. "Come on, son, before we all freeze solid." Noah climbed down. His legs buckled when he hit the ground, and Caleb steadied him. Biscuit waddled over and shoved his nose into Noah's hand. The boy flinched, then froze. Then, slowly, his fingers uncurled and touched the dog's head. Biscuit licked his wrist. Noah pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. "He licked me." "That means he likes you," Rosie said. "Why?" "Because you're likable. Come on, I'll show you inside." She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the cabin. Caleb watched them go. Rosie was half Noah's height and twice his confidence, dragging this broken boy into her world like it was the most natural thing she'd ever done. Martha's daughter, through and through. He unhitched the horses, fed them, and checked the barn, moved slow on purpose, giving Noah time to breathe before Caleb came in with his questions and his worry and his useless need to fix everything at once. When he finally stepped inside, the cabin was warm. Rosie had built the fire back up, something Caleb had taught her last winter, when the fever laid him flat for 3 days, and she'd had to keep them both alive. She was sitting on the floor with Biscuit's head in her lap, talking to Noah, who stood in the middle of the room, turning slow circles. "That's Daddy's chair. That's my chair. You can have Mama's chair if you want. She's in heaven, so she doesn't need it anymore." Noah stopped turning. "Your mama died?" "When I was born. Daddy says she was the best person he ever knew." "My mama died too. Fever. I was 5. Rosie nodded, serious, like they'd just discovered they belonged to the same terrible club. "Does it hurt?" "I don't remember her enough for it to hurt. That's worse, I think." "Yeah." Rosie scratched Biscuit's ear. "I don't remember mine either. But Daddy tells me stories about her. He says she laughed really loud and burned cornbread worse than he burns biscuits." "I heard that," Caleb said from the doorway. "It's true, Daddy." "Your mama was a wonderful cook." "Clara says she burned everything." "Clara talks too much." Caleb hung his coat and moved to the stove. "Noah, you hungry?" The boy's eyes snapped to him, that automatic alertness, the flinch before the question was even finished. "I don't need much. I can eat whatever's left over. Or I don't have to eat. I ate at the lady's house." "That was broth. That ain't a meal." Caleb pulled out the skillet. "I'm making eggs and bacon. You're eating. That's not a question." "Yes, sir." "What'd I say about sir?" "Sorry. Yes, Caleb." "Better. Rosie, set the table. 3 plates." "3 plates?" Rosie scrambled up, counting on her fingers. "1 for Daddy, 1 for me, 1 for Noah. That's 3. We've never had 3 before." The words sat in the air. Caleb cracked eggs into the pan and didn't turn around. His throat was too tight for talking. They ate at the table together. Noah sat in Martha's chair, and something about that felt right and wrong at the same time. The boy ate the way he'd eaten at Clara's, slow, deliberate, each bite calculated, like he was storing fuel for a journey he might have to make at any moment. "You don't have to eat slow," Rosie said. "There's more." "There's always more?" "Daddy has chickens. They make eggs every day." Noah looked at Caleb. "Every day?" "Every day." Something shifted in the boy's face. A tiny recalculation. A world where food came daily was a world he'd stopped believing in. "Noah," Caleb set his fork down, "I'm not going to push you tonight. You're tired and you're hurt, and you've had enough for one day. But I need you to know something. Whatever you tell me, whenever you're ready to tell it, I'm going to believe you. And I'm going to help. That's not going to change." Noah's hands stilled on his plate. He looked at Caleb for a long time. Then he nodded once and went back to eating. After supper, Rosie showed Noah the loft. Caleb listened to her footsteps above, her voice explaining the blankets, the pillow, the spot near the chimney where the warmth collected. "If you get scared at night, just call for Daddy. He always comes." "I don't get scared." "Everybody gets scared. Daddy gets scared." "No, he doesn't." "He does. He just doesn't show it. Clara told me that's what brave means, being scared and doing stuff anyway." Silence. Then Noah's voice, stripped down to nothing. "I'm scared all the time." "That's okay. You're the bravest person I ever met then." Caleb sat at the kitchen table and pressed his palms against his eyes. His daughter was 7 years old, and she understood things he'd spent 38 years trying to learn. He checked the rifle above the door. Loaded. He checked the revolver on the table. Loaded. He checked the shutters, the door bolt, the back window. Then he poured himself whiskey and sat in the dark, listening to the children breathe. Slade would come. Not tonight, probably. He'd go back to his mine, regroup, figure his legal options. A man like Slade didn't operate on rage. He operated on calculation. That made him more dangerous, not less. Caleb needed help. Real help. A lawyer, a marshal, witnesses. He needed Agnes's medical report and Reverend Calloway's testimony, and Clara's willingness to stand up in public and say what everyone in town already whispered in private. He needed all of it, and he needed it fast. He finished the whiskey, checked the locks one more time, then he climbed the ladder to the loft. Noah was in the corner, curled in a ball, exactly the way Caleb had found him behind the water trough. Eyes open, watching. "Can't sleep?" "Don't usually sleep much." "Mind if I sit?" Noah shrugged. Caleb lowered himself to the floor, his bad leg protesting. Rosie slept 3 feet away, sprawled out like a starfish, biscuit at her feet. "She always sleep like that?" Noah asked. "Since she was a baby, takes up the whole bed. Don't know how something that small can take up that much space." The ghost of that almost smile again, gone before it fully formed. "Caleb." "Yeah?" "What if Slade brings the sheriff?" "Then we deal with the sheriff." "What if the sheriff's on his side?" "Then we go above the sheriff." "What if everybody's on his side?" Caleb looked at the boy. "Then it's just us, and that's enough." "How can you say that? You don't know what he's like. You don't know what he does." "Then tell me." Noah went quiet. His fingers worked at the edge of the blanket, the same nervous habit Caleb had noticed on the wagon. A self-soothing gesture, something the boy did when the memories pressed too close. "Not tonight," Noah whispered. "I can't tonight." "All right, not tonight." But Caleb, yeah, my brother Eli, he's the reason I got out. He started a fight with the biggest guard, took a beating so I could slip through the fence. I heard them breaking his ribs. I heard him screaming, and I just kept running. Caleb's chest compressed. You did what he wanted you to do. I left him. You survived. That's what he was fighting for. What if he's dead? What if he's alive and waiting for somebody to come get him? Noah's breath hitched. He pulled the blanket tighter around himself. He's tough. Tougher than me. He once went 3 days in the hole and came out singing, just to make Slade mad. Eli never let Slade see him break. That's why Slade hated him. Couldn't break him, no matter what he did. Sounds like someone I'd want on my side. He's the best person I know. He gave me his food when I was too sick to work. Took my shifts in the tunnel when I couldn't stand up. 4 years he kept me alive. Then we owe him, and I pay my debts. Noah looked at him in the dark. 2 brown eyes, still guarded, still calculating, but with something new underneath. A crack in the armor. A sliver of light leaking through. Nobody ever came for us before. We waited. First year, we thought somebody would notice. Somebody would care. Nobody did. I care. Why? We're just kids nobody wanted. My sister Annabelle was a kid nobody wanted. The words came out before Caleb could stop them. He hadn't talked about Annabelle in years. Decades. Our father sold her to a man when she was 10. Sold her like livestock. I was 12 and too small to stop it. I looked for her for 15 years. Never found her. Noah went still. Is she dead? I don't know. That's the worst part. Not knowing. I wake up some nights and I think, maybe she's alive somewhere. Maybe she grew up. Maybe she's got a family. Or maybe she didn't survive whatever that man did to her. And I'll never know, because I was too small and too scared to save her. You were 12. Old enough to try. They sat in silence. The fire crackled below. Wind pressed against the cabin walls. Is that why you helped me? Noah asked. Because of her? Because of her. Because of Martha. Because of a lot of people I couldn't save. Caleb paused. And because my daughter looked at me with her mother's eyes and asked me to bring you home. I couldn't say no to Martha either. You must have loved her a lot. More than anything except Rosie. And some days, the missing her feels like it's going to split me in two. Does it get better? No, but you get stronger. Strong enough to carry it. Noah was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled the blanket up to his chin and closed his eyes. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for the coat, and the food, and the bed. You don't have to thank me for things you should have always had. I know, but nobody else gave them to me. So thank you. Caleb sat there until Noah's breathing evened out. Then he climbed down the ladder, his legs screaming, and went back to his chair by the cold stove. He didn't sleep. Dawn came gray and bitter. Caleb had the fire rebuilt and coffee boiling before the first light crept through the windows. He was frying bacon when he heard hoofbeats. His hand went to the rifle. One rider, coming from town, not from the west. He relaxed slightly when he recognized the horse. Reverend James Calloway dismounted in the yard. 60 years old, white hair, straight back. He'd been a Union soldier before he was a preacher, and some days the soldier still showed through. Morning, James. Morning, Caleb. Heard you had quite a day yesterday. News travels fast. Clara sent her boy to my house before sundown. Told me everything. Calloway tied his horse and followed Caleb inside. Where's the child? Sleeping. First real sleep he's had in years, from the look of it. Calloway accepted coffee and sat at the table. His eyes were serious. The eyes of a man who'd seen Antietam and Fredericksburg and the worst things people could do to each other, and still chose to believe in God.
Caleb, do you know what you've started?
I know. Slade's got connections in Denver. Judge Harlan signed those guardianship papers. If Slade pushes this legally, you could lose. You could go to jail for kidnapping. He was selling the boy in the street, James. Rope around his waist, calling out prices. Calloway's cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Selling? Like a horse at auction. 30 people standing there watching. Nobody doing a damn thing. The Reverend set the cup down slowly. Who were the witnesses? Half the town. Would they testify? Would they want to get on the wrong side of a man with money and guns? Some might, if they were asked the right way. By who? By their pastor. Calloway's jaw set. I'll talk to them. Every last one. And I'll write a letter to Federal Marshal Wade Prescott in Denver. I served with his father at Fredericksburg. He'll listen. What about the judge, Harlan? Harlan's a politician on a bench. He goes where the wind blows. If we can get enough pressure, enough evidence, enough noise, the wind might blow our way. Footsteps on the ladder. Noah climbed down, wearing the clothes Clara had given him, his hair sticking up, his face still carrying sleep. He saw Calloway and froze. Easy, Caleb said. This is Reverend Calloway. He's a friend. Calloway didn't stand, didn't move toward the boy, just nodded from his seat. Morning, Noah. I hear you're staying with Caleb and Rosie for a while. Noah looked at Caleb. Caleb nodded. The boy inched toward the table and sat down. His eyes never left the Reverend. Are you a real preacher? Noah asked. 30 years now. We had a preacher come to the mine once. Mr. Slade brought him to show we were being treated right. The preacher looked at us and said we were blessed to have someone providing for us. Said hard work was God's way of building character. Calloway's face went hard. That man wasn't a preacher. He was a liar, using God's name. How do I know you're different? You don't, not yet. But I'll prove it. Same way Caleb's proving it. One day at a time. Noah considered this. Then he reached for the bacon on the table and took a piece. Caleb noticed the boy's hands weren't shaking as much as yesterday. Rosie thundered down the ladder, Biscuit somehow ahead of her, and the cabin filled with noise and motion. She hugged Caleb, waved at Calloway, and sat down next to Noah like he'd always been there. Did you sleep good? Better than I have in a long time. See, I told you the loft was warm. It is warm. Did Biscuit snore? He snores really loud. I didn't hear him. Then you slept really good, because Biscuit snores louder than Daddy. I don't snore, Caleb said. You do, Daddy. The walls shake. Calloway hid a smile behind his coffee cup. Noah watched this exchange like a man watching a play in the language he was slowly learning to understand. The teasing, the warmth, the easy back and forth of people who loved each other and showed it through small, daily mockery. After breakfast, Calloway pulled Caleb aside on the porch. I'll ride to Denver this week. Talk to Marshal Prescott personally. But Caleb, you need to be ready. Slade won't wait for legal channels. I know. Keep your rifle loaded and your eyes open. Been doing that since 1862. One more thing. Calloway hesitated. The boy. He's holding something back. I could see it in his eyes. His brother, Eli, still at the mine. There's more than that. Something he's not ready to say. Don't push him, but be ready when it comes. Whatever it is, it's big. Calloway rode out. Caleb watched him go, then turned back to the cabin. Through the window, he could see Rosie teaching Noah to play checkers with bottle caps, on a board Caleb had carved 2 winters ago. The boy was listening with the concentration of someone learning something far more important than a game. Agnes arrived at noon. She came in without knocking, set her bag on the table, and handed Caleb a sealed envelope. Full report, 12 pages. I've documented everything. 37 lash marks, 3 rib fractures, rope burns, thermal burns on both feet, strangulation bruises, malnutrition consistent with prolonged starvation. This is the worst case of child abuse I've seen in 15 years of practice. And I once treated a boy whose father tried to set him on fire. Will it hold up in court? It'll hold up in any court with a judge who has eyes. What if the judge is blind? Then I'll make him see. Agnes looked toward where Noah sat with Rosie. Caleb, that boy's carrying more than physical scars. He flinches at raised voices. He doesn't turn his back to doors. He eats like every meal is his last. Those are survival patterns from prolonged captivity. He needs time, patience, consistency. He'll get it. And when Slade comes, he'll get something different.
Agnes studied him.
Martha always said you were the most stubborn man in Colorado. Second most stubborn. She was first. Agnes almost smiled. Almost. I'll be back day after tomorrow to check his ribs. Make sure he's eating. Small meals, frequent. His stomach needs to relearn how to handle real food. She left. Caleb put the medical report in a strongbox under the floorboard. $83, a deed to the ranch, and now 12 pages that could save a boy's life or start a war. The day passed quiet. Noah helped with chores without being asked, moving with a careful efficiency that spoke of years spent avoiding punishment by being useful. He fed the chickens and stood there watching them peck and scratch with an expression Caleb couldn't read. You ever had chickens before? Caleb asked. No, they're funny. They don't know they're funny, but they are. That's what makes them funny. Noah's mouth twitched, that almost smile again, getting closer each time. Late afternoon, Rosie dragged Noah to the barn to meet the horses. Caleb followed, leaning on the corral fence, watching his daughter introduce Noah to each animal by name and personality. This is Copper. He's Daddy's horse. He's old and cranky. This is Penny. She's mine, but she's too big for me, so Daddy rides her sometimes. And this is Ghost. She's white, and she doesn't like strangers, but she'll like you. Noah held out his hand to Ghost the way he'd held out his hand to Biscuit. Careful, ready to pull back. The mare sniffed his fingers and blew warm air across his palm. She likes you, Rosie beamed. See? Animals always know. Know what? If you're good. Animals can tell. Noah stroked Ghost's nose. His hand was steady, no trembling. Something about the horse's warmth, the simple trust of an animal that only knew kindness or cruelty and nothing in between, reached a place in the boy that words hadn't touched yet. Caleb, Noah said without turning around. Yeah, there's something I didn't tell you. Caleb's stomach tightened. He kept his voice level. All right. The kids at the mine, some of them are really little, 6, 7 years old. They use them for the narrowest tunnels, the ones where even kids my size can't fit. Noah's hand kept stroking Ghost's nose. His voice stayed flat, controlled. One of them is a girl. Her name is Sadie. She's 7. Same age as Rosie. Rosie went still. Eli looks after her, like he looked after me. She calls him Big Brother. Noah's hand stopped moving. If Slade finds out I talked, he won't punish me. He'll punish them. That's how he keeps us quiet. He hurts the people you love. The corral was silent, except for the horses breathing. "Noah," Caleb said, "look at me." The boy turned. His eyes were dry, beyond tears, in a place where crying couldn't reach. "We're going to get them out. Eli, Sadie, every last one of those kids. That's not a hope. That's a plan." "You're one man with a limp and a rifle." "I'm one man with a limp and a rifle and a whole lot of people who are about to get very angry when they hear what you just told me." Noah held his gaze, searching, weighing, running the same calculation he always ran. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." That night, after the children were in the loft, Caleb sat at the table with a pen and paper. He wrote 3 letters, one to Marshall Prescott, backing up whatever Calloway would say in person, one to a lawyer in Denver named Samuel Graves, whose name Agnes had given him, and one to Clara Jennings, asking her to start talking to every person in Burden Creek who'd been at that market square, every person who'd watched Slade try to sell a child and done nothing. He sealed the letters and set them by the door. Tomorrow he'd ride to town and send them. Tomorrow the fight would begin in earnest. He checked the locks, checked the rifle, poured whiskey he didn't drink. Then he heard it. Soft, almost nothing, coming from the loft. Crying. Not Rosie. Noah. The boy was crying in his sleep, small broken sounds that he was trying to swallow even unconscious. Even in dreams, he was hiding his pain. Caleb climbed the ladder. Noah was curled tight, arms wrapped around his knees, whimpering. Rosie was awake beside him, her hand on his back, rubbing small circles the way Caleb rubbed her back when she had nightmares. "He keeps saying a name," Rosie whispered. "Eli. He keeps saying Eli." Caleb sat down on the other side of Noah and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. The crying eased, the whimpering faded. Noah's body slowly unclenched, his breathing deepening, his face going slack. "Daddy," Rosie whispered. "Yeah, baby. We have to get his brother." "We will." "Promise?" "Promise." "Good." She lay back down, her hand still on Noah's back. "Because he cries every night, Daddy. He tries to be quiet, but I can hear him. And I think the only thing that'll make it stop is if Eli comes home." Caleb sat in the dark between his daughter and this boy who was becoming his son, listening to them breathe, feeling the weight of every promise he'd made pressing down like the Colorado snow on the cabin roof. Somewhere in the mountains, in a mine shaft where children worked in darkness, Eli Ward was waiting. Caleb just had to reach him in time. 3 days passed before Slade made his move. Caleb was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard them coming. Not hoofbeats this time. Wagon wheels. Heavy ones. The sound of something official. He set the axe down and reached for the rifle leaning against the woodpile. "Noah, Rosie, inside." Noah was at the well, hauling water with arms that were getting stronger every day. He dropped the bucket and grabbed Rosie's hand. The 2 of them disappeared into the cabin without a word. No argument. No hesitation. Noah had been running from danger his whole life, and he knew the sound of it coming. Caleb walked around to the front of the cabin. 2 wagons coming up the road. The first carried 3 men, Slade in the middle, wearing that black coat, his scar pale in the winter light. Virgil Hobbs on his left, tall and thin and carrying a rifle across his knees. Dutch Perry on his right, fat and red-faced, a pistol on each hip. The second wagon carried a man Caleb didn't recognize. Small, neat, wearing a suit that had no business being on a dirt road in December. He held a leather case on his lap and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Slade climbed down first, slow, making a show of it. "Morning, Mackenzie. Get off my land." Now that's no way to greet a man who's come to settle things peaceful. Slade gestured to the suited man. "This here is Mr. Leland Cross, attorney at law. He's got papers from Judge Harlan in Denver. Legal custody order. You can read them yourself if you like."
The lawyer stepped down and approached Caleb with the leather case. His hands were shaking.
"Mr. Mackenzie, I have a court order requiring you to surrender the minor child, Noah Ward, to his legal guardian, Mr. Mordecai Slade. Failure to comply constitutes kidnapping under Colorado territorial law and is punishable by—" "I know what it's punishable by." "Then you understand I'm required to—" "I understand you're standing on my property with a man who beats children. I understand you drove 40 miles in the cold to take a 9-year-old boy back to a mine shaft where he's been tortured for 4 years. I understand all of that. Now you understand something." Caleb's voice dropped. "That boy is not leaving this ranch." Slade smiled, that smooth, calculated smile. "You hear that, Mr. Cross? The man just said he's going to defy a court order. In front of witnesses. I believe that's a crime. Mr. Mackenzie," the lawyer's voice cracked, "please, I don't want trouble. Just hand over the boy and we can—" "You don't want trouble? Then why'd you ride out here with a man who puts children in holes in the ground? With a man who whips 9-year-olds until their backs look like butcher meat?" The lawyer went pale. He looked at Slade. Slade's smile didn't waver. "The boy has an active imagination," Slade said. "Kids make up stories. You know how it is. I've seen the scars. Kids get hurt on a working operation. It's the nature of the business. Your business is slavery. My business is legal, signed and sanctioned by the territorial court, which is more than I can say for whatever you think you're doing here." The cabin door opened. Caleb didn't turn, but he heard the footsteps. Small ones. Noah's. "Noah, get back inside." "No." The boy's voice was thin but steady. He walked past Caleb and stood between him and Slade. His whole body was shaking, but his chin was up. "I'm not going back, Mr. Slade." Slade's smile turned into something else, something cold and sharp. "Is that so, boy? I told them what you did. I told them about Samuel, about Daniel, about the hole, about all of it." "You told them lies." "I told them the truth, and I'll tell a judge the same thing." Slade took a step forward. Caleb moved between them, the rifle across his chest. "Close enough. You're making a mistake, Mackenzie. A big one. I've got the law. I've got witnesses. I've got a judge in Denver who'll have you in chains by Christmas. And I've got a doctor's report with 37 lash marks documented on a 9-year-old boy's back. I've got a reverend riding to Denver right now to talk to a federal marshal. And I've got a town full of people who watched you try to sell a child in the street 3 days ago." Something flickered across Slade's face. The first crack in the smooth facade. He recovered fast. "Nobody's going to testify against me." "You sure about that?" "People in this town know better. People in this town watched you put a rope on a child and call out prices. You think they'll forget that? You think their wives will let them forget?" Virgil Hobbs shifted on the wagon. His hand moved toward his rifle. Caleb tracked the movement. "Tell your man to keep his hands where I can see them." "Virgil's just getting comfortable." "Virgil can get comfortable with his hands on his knees, or he can get comfortable in the dirt. His choice." Hobbs looked at Slade. Slade gave a tiny nod. Hobbs put his hands on his knees. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Mackenzie, regardless of any allegations, the current court order is valid. If you have evidence of abuse, the proper course is to file a counter-petition with 'already done.'" The lawyer blinked. "Pardon?" I said it's already done. Filed yesterday. Counter petition for emergency custody, supported by medical evidence, eyewitness testimony, and a request for federal investigation.
You want to see the copies? I've got them inside. That was a bluff. Caleb had written the letters, but they hadn't been filed yet. Calloway was still on the road to Denver. The letters were still sitting on the table, sealed and waiting. But Slade didn't know that, and the lawyer definitely didn't know that. Slade studied Caleb. The calculation was visible, the weighing of options, the assessment of risk. This wasn't the simple rancher he'd expected. This was a man who'd been a soldier, a man who planned ahead. "Let me make this simple," Slade said. "I came here peaceful today. Papers, lawyers, everything by the book. You want to fight this in court? Fine, we'll fight it in court. But understand something." He leaned forward slightly. "I've been operating that mine for 6 years. I've had people ask questions before. Marshals, reporters, do-gooders. They all went away. Every single one. Some changed their minds. Some got persuaded. Some just disappeared." That a threat? That's history. I'm telling you how this works. Let me tell you how this works. Caleb stepped forward until he was close enough to see the individual threads of Slade's scar. "You've got 22 children in that mine. I know it. Doc Whitfield knows it. Reverend Calloway knows it. A federal marshal is going to know it by the end of the week. You can threaten me. You can bring lawyers. You can bring guns. But you're not getting this boy. Not today. Not ever. You're one man. I'm one man who doesn't have anything to lose. You want to think about how dangerous that makes me." Slade's jaw tightened. For a long moment, they stood there, two men in the snow, measuring each other. Then Slade turned to his lawyer. "Mr. Cross, please note that Mr. Mackenzie has refused to comply with a valid court order. Note the date and time." "Noted," the lawyer said quickly. Slade looked at Noah. The boy hadn't moved, still standing there with his fists clenched and his chin up. "I'll see you soon, boy. Real soon." Noah's voice came out steady, stronger than Caleb had ever heard it. "You don't scare me anymore." Something ugly moved across Slade's face, just for a second. Then the mask was back. He climbed onto the wagon, Hobbs and Perry flanking him. The lawyer scrambled onto the second wagon, nearly dropping his case. "1 week, Mackenzie," Slade called over his shoulder. "Judge Harlan set a hearing for December 21st, 1 week from today. You show up with that boy, or I'll come get him myself. And next time, I won't bring a lawyer." The wagons pulled away. Caleb stood watching until they were specks on the white horizon. Then he lowered the rifle and let out a breath he'd been holding for 10 minutes. Noah was still standing where he'd been. His fists were still clenched, but his whole body was vibrating now, the adrenaline draining out, leaving him hollow. "You shouldn't have come outside," Caleb said. "I had to." "Why?" "Because if I hid from him, I'd always be hiding from him. And I'm done hiding." Caleb looked at this boy, 9 years old and talking like a man who'd decided where to plant his flag. "That was brave, son." "Didn't feel brave. Felt like I was going to throw up." "That's what brave feels like." The cabin door opened and Rosie flew out. She grabbed Noah and held on. "I heard everything. He's horrible. He's the most horrible man in the whole world." "He's coming back, Rosie." "Then we'll be ready." Noah looked at Caleb over Rosie's head. 1 week. That's not much time." "Then we better not waste it." Caleb rode to town that afternoon, left Noah and Rosie with a loaded rifle and instructions he hoped they wouldn't need. At the telegraph office, he sent 2 messages. One to Calloway in Denver. One to Samuel Graves, the lawyer Agnes had recommended. The telegraph operator read them back with wide eyes.
"You're really going after Mordecai Slade?"
"I'm really going after Mordecai Slade."
"He's got friends everywhere."
"So do I." He stopped at Clara's next. She was waiting for him on the porch, like she'd known he was coming. "He showed up this morning," Caleb said. "Brought a lawyer and a court order."
"I heard. Morrison saw the wagons heading your direction."
Clara folded her arms.
"What do you need?"
"Witnesses. Everyone who was at that market when Slade had Noah on the crate. Every person who saw the rope, heard the prices, watched it happen, and did nothing. I need them to stop doing nothing."
"Some won't talk. They're scared."
"They should be scared. Scared of what happens if Slade keeps doing this. There's a 7-year-old girl in that mine, Clara. Same age as Rosie." Clara's face changed.
"What?"
"Noah told me. Her name's Sadie. She works the narrow tunnels, the ones too small for the bigger kids." Clara's hands gripped the porch railing until her knuckles went white.
"I'll get you your witnesses, every last one, and God help anyone who says no."
Agnes was at her office when Caleb knocked. She let him in without a word and poured coffee that tasted like turpentine. "Slade came to the ranch." "I know. 3 people came to tell me before noon."
"I need your testimony, in person, in front of Judge Harlan in Denver."
"When?"
"December 21st.
Agnes didn't hesitate. "I'll be there. And Caleb, I've been doing some research. Slade's mine has been operating for 6 years. In that time, not a single child has ever been seen leaving that operation. They go in, they don't come out. Either he's keeping them indefinitely, or they're buried up there. I want to examine the site. If there are graves, I can document them. Medical evidence of death, combined with evidence of abuse, would be enough to override any guardianship paper ever signed."
"You'd have to get past Slade's men."
"Then get me past them." Caleb stared at her. This 55-year-old woman, with silver hair and steady hands, ready to ride into a guarded mining camp in December to dig up children's graves. "Martha would have liked you." "Martha did like me. We had tea every Thursday until the consumption took her." Agnes set her cup down. "You didn't know that?" "She never said." "She said a lot of things she never told you. That's what women do, Caleb. We carry the parts you can't handle." He rode home in the dark. The cold bit through his coat, and his leg throbbed with every stride. But his mind was working, planning, counting the days until the hearing and the things that needed to happen in between. He was a mile from the ranch when he saw the fire. Not the cabin, thank God, not the cabin. The barn. Orange light against the black sky, flames licking up the north wall, smoke pouring into the winter night. Caleb kicked his horse hard. The animal surged forward, hooves pounding through the snow. He could hear the horses screaming inside the barn, could hear Rosie's voice, high and terrified, calling his name. He was off the horse before it stopped. "Rosie! Noah! Daddy!" Rosie appeared at the cabin door.
"Daddy, the barn's on fire. Noah's in there. He went to get the horses out."
Caleb's heart stopped. "He's inside?"
"He said he had to save them. I tried to stop him, Daddy. I tried."
Caleb ran. The heat hit him 20 feet from the barn door. Inside, he could hear Noah coughing, could hear the horses thrashing. He pulled his bandana over his mouth and went in. The smoke was thick. He couldn't see. He could hear. Copper screaming in his stall. Penny kicking. Ghost somewhere in the back. And Noah's voice, hoarse and desperate. Come on, girl, move!" Caleb followed the voice. Found Noah in Ghost's stall, trying to pull the terrified mare toward the door. The boy had the halter in both hands and was leaning back with everything he had, which wasn't much. Ghost was wild-eyed, planted,
refusing to move. Noah, get out. I've got this. She won't move. I said, get out. I'm not leaving her. There wasn't time to argue. Caleb grabbed Ghost's halter above Noah's hands and pulled. The mare fought him. He pulled harder. His bad legs screamed. A beam cracked overhead, and Noah threw himself over Ghost's neck, shielding the horse with his body. Move, girl, please! Ghost moved. Whether it was Caleb's strength, or Noah's plea, or the beam falling where she'd been standing a second before, the mare lurched forward. They stumbled through the smoke, Noah clinging to the halter, Caleb pushing from behind, until they burst through the barn door into the freezing air. Copper and Penny were already out. Rosie had opened their stalls while Noah went for Ghost. 7 years old, and she'd walked into a burning barn to save 2 horses. Martha's daughter. They stood in the yard watching the barn burn. Nothing to be done. No water close enough. No way to fight it. The structure collapsed in on itself, sending sparks spiraling into the black sky. Noah was on his knees, coughing. Caleb knelt beside him. You all right? Yeah. The boy's voice was raw from smoke. Yeah. The horses? All 3 out, thanks to you. And Rosie, she got Copper and Penny. I know. Caleb put his hand on the boy's back. That was stupid, Noah, running into a burning building. You did the same thing. I'm allowed. I'm a grown man. That don't make it less stupid. Caleb almost laughed. Almost. Then he saw something in the snow. Boot prints. 2 sets, leading from the barn to the road and heading south. Toward town. Toward the trail that led west. Noah, I see them. This wasn't an accident. No. Rosie was standing by the horses, her arms around Penny's neck. Daddy, somebody did this on purpose? Yeah, baby, somebody did. Mr. Slade? Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. They all knew. Noah stood up. The firelight caught his face, and what Caleb saw there wasn't fear. It was rage. Cold, focused, ancient rage. The kind that builds in a child who's been beaten and starved and buried and burned, and has finally found a place worth fighting for. He thinks he can scare us into giving up, Noah said. He's wrong. He burned your barn. I'll build another one. What if he comes back? What if next time it's the cabin? Then he'll find me waiting. Caleb straightened up. Noah, listen to me. This is what Slade does. He pushes until people break. He takes what you care about and destroys it until you've got nothing left and you give him what he wants. That's his whole game. It worked before, on everybody. It's not going to work on me. How do you know? Because I've already lost everything once. My wife, my sister, my best friend. I've been at the bottom, son. I've been where there's nothing left to take. And I'm still standing. Slade can burn every building I own. He can take every dollar. He can bring the whole damn territory down on my head. But he can't make me quit. Noah looked at him. The rage was still there, but something else was growing beside it. Something that looked like belief. Caleb. Yeah? I want to tell you something. About the mine. Something I haven't told anyone. I'm listening. There's a tunnel. The deepest one. Shaft 7, they call it. Slade keeps his records there. Ledgers. Names of every kid who's come through the operation. Dates. What happened to them. Noah's voice dropped. And where he buried the ones who died. Caleb went still. You're sure?
I've seen the books. Eli showed me once. He snuck in there at night and found them. Names and dates going back 6 years. Dozens of names, Caleb. Dozens. If we could get those ledgers, no judge could ignore them, not even Harlan.
They stood there in the dying light of the fire, the snow falling around them, the horses stamping and blowing in the cold. 3 people who should have been broken, but weren't. 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to fight. Rosie walked over and took Noah's hand. Then she took Caleb's.
Daddy?
Yeah, baby.
We're going to that mine, aren't we?
Caleb looked at his daughter. 7 years old, Martha's eyes, Martha's heart, Martha's iron spine.
Yeah, he said. We are.
Caleb left before dawn. He kissed Rosie's forehead while she slept, pulled the blanket up around Noah's thin shoulders, checked the rifle he'd left loaded by the door and the revolver he'd placed on the table within Clara's reach. Clara had come out from town the night before, carrying a shotgun and a basket of biscuits and a look that said she'd shoot first and cook breakfast second.
You come back alive, Caleb Thornton, Clara said from Martha's chair. Those children need you.
I plan to. Planning and doing are different things. I've buried 2 husbands. Don't make me bury you, too. He rode out into the dark. The snow had stopped, but the cold hadn't. The kind of cold that got inside your bones and stayed there. The kind that killed men who stopped moving. Marshal Wade Prescott was waiting at the crossroads 2 miles south of town. Calloway had done his work. The marshal had ridden from Denver in 3 days, pushing hard, and he brought 4 deputies with him. 5 men and badges. 5 men and the law. Mackenzie! Prescott dismounted and shook Caleb's hand. 44 years old, square jaw, eyes that looked like they'd seen the inside of every lie ever told and hadn't been impressed. Calloway told me what you've got. The Reverend's a hard man to say no to. That's why I sent him. Your doctor's report is the most damning piece of medical evidence I've read in 20 years. If even half of what that boy says is true, it's all true. Then Slade's a dead man walking. He just doesn't know it yet. Prescott pulled a folded paper from his coat. Federal warrant, signed by Judge Crawford in Denver, authorizes me to search Slade's operation, seize records, and take custody of any minors found in unsafe conditions. Crawford, not Harlan? Harlan's jurisdiction is territorial. This warrant is federal. Forced labor of minors falls under federal statutes. Harlan can hold his hearing all he wants. This supersedes anything he rules. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, the first real breath he'd taken in days. When do we move? Now. I want to hit that mine before Slade gets wind of what's coming. They rode west, 6 men pushing hard through the snow. Caleb's legs screamed with every mile, but he didn't slow down. Couldn't slow down. Every hour they delayed was an hour those children spent underground. Noah had drawn them a map, sketched it on the back of one of Rosie's schoolwork pages, with the careful precision of a boy who'd memorized every inch of his prison. Every tunnel entrance, every guard post, every escape route he'd plotted and never used until the night he finally ran. The main entrance faces south, Caleb told Prescott as they rode. 3 guards rotate. Hobbs and Perry are the dangerous ones. There's a back entrance through a gulch on the north side. That's where they bring supplies. Fewer guards. Noah says sometimes no guards at all between midnight and dawn. How many men total? Noah counted 6, including Slade, but Slade usually keeps 2 or 3 at the mine and takes the others with him. So we might be looking at 3 armed men. Possibly 4, against 6 of us, with federal authority. That's better odds than I had at Antietam. Prescott looked at him. You were at Antietam? 20th Maine was supposed to be there. We got rerouted. Ended up at a field hospital outside Sharpsburg instead. Spent 3 days carrying stretchers. Saw more blood than I'd seen in my whole life, before or since. Until now. Until that boy's back, yeah. They reached the ridge above the mine as the sun broke the horizon. Prescott signaled a halt, and they dismounted, moving to the tree line on foot. Below them, the operation sprawled across the valley floor. Tents, sheds, the dark mouths of mine shafts cut into the hillside. And already, in the gray morning light, small figures were moving. Children, hauling buckets, carrying tools, heading toward the tunnels with the mechanical obedience of creatures who'd learned that stopping meant pain. "Jesus Christ," one of the deputies whispered. "Count them," Prescott said. Caleb counted. 14 visible. More probably already underground. The youngest couldn't have been more than 6. A girl with dark hair, stumbling under a bucket that was too heavy for her. A bigger boy walked behind her, his hand on her back, steadying her. "That's Eli," Caleb said. His throat was tight. "The tall one, with the girl." "The girl Sadie?" "Has to be." Prescott studied the scene through his field glasses. 2 guards visible, one at the main entrance, one walking the perimeter. "I don't see Slade." "Noah said Slade sleeps in the big tent on the east side." Prescott turned to his deputies. "Mitchell, Dalton, you take the main entrance. Reeves, Garner, circle north and cover the back. Mackenzie, you're with me. We go straight for Slade's tent." "The children." "We secure Slade first. Once he's in irons, his men will fold. They always do when the money stops." They moved down the ridge in 2 groups. The snow muffled their approach. Caleb's heart hammered against his ribs. His hand was steady on the rifle. Whatever happened in the next 10 minutes would decide everything. Mitchell and Dalton reached the main entrance. The guard there was young, barely 20, and when he saw the badges, his rifle hit the ground before Prescott finished identifying himself. "Federal Marshal, you're under arrest. Hands behind your back." "I just work here, sir. I don't—" "Save it for the judge." The perimeter guard heard the commotion and ran. Reeves tackled him 20 yards from the back entrance. The man went down hard in the snow and didn't get up. Prescott and Caleb reached Slade's tent. Prescott pulled the flap back and went in first, pistol drawn. Caleb followed. Slade was awake, sitting on the edge of his cot, pulling on his boots. He looked up and saw the badge and the guns, and his face did something complicated. Surprise first, then calculation, then something that might have been fear, quickly buried. "Marshal." "Mordecai Slade, you're under arrest by federal authority. Charges include forced labor of minors, child endangerment, assault, and suspicion of murder. Stand up and put your hands where I can see them." Slade stood slowly. His eyes moved to Caleb. "Mackenzie, I should have burned your cabin instead of your barn. You should have left that boy alone. That boy is my legal, your legal nothing." Prescott stepped forward with the irons. "Judge Crawford voided your guardianship papers this morning. Every single one. You've got no legal claim to any child on this property." Something broke in Slade's face. The smooth mask, the calculated control, the careful performance of respectability that he'd maintained for 6 years. It all crumbled at once, and underneath was exactly what Caleb had always known was there. Rage. Pure, ugly, bottomless rage. "You can't do this. Harlan signed those papers. I've got rights." "You've got the right to remain silent." Prescott clicked the iron shut. "I'd exercise it." Caleb walked out of the tent. He didn't need to see Slade anymore. Didn't need to hear his excuses. There was only one thing he needed now. The children had stopped working. They stood in clusters around the mine entrance, silent, watching the deputies move through the camp with wide, frightened eyes. Some were crying. Some just stood there with the blank faces of people who'd stopped believing that anything could change. Caleb scanned the group, found the tall boy, dark hair, one eye still swollen from an old beating, standing with his arm around the small girl, shielding her with his body even now. Eli. The boy flinched, drew the girl closer. His one good eye locked on Caleb with suspicion sharp enough to cut. "My name's Caleb Thornton. Your brother Noah is safe. He's at my ranch. He sent me to bring you home." Eli didn't move, didn't speak. The calculation running behind his eye was identical to Noah's. The same survival math. The same weighing of risk against hope. Brothers. Same blood. Same damage.
"You're lying," Eli said. "Noah's dead. Slade said he caught him and Slade's in handcuffs. He won't be saying anything to anyone for a long time." Caleb reached into his coat and pulled out the one thing Noah had given him that morning. A small object wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it and held it out. A wooden horse. Carved rough, barely 2 inches tall. The kind of thing a boy might whittle with a stolen knife during the only free minutes of a day spent underground. Eli's face shattered. "Where did you get that?" "Noah said you carved it for him. His first week in the camp. He said you told him it was a magic horse that could run faster than anything, and one day it would carry him out of here." Eli's hand shook as he took the horse. He turned it over in his fingers, and 4 years of holding himself together came apart in his hands. His knees buckled. Caleb caught him. "He's alive?" Eli's voice was a boy's voice now, not the hardened survivor, not the protector. Just a 13-year-old kid who'd spent 4 years in hell believing his brother was dead. "He's really alive?" "He's alive. He's safe. He's been sleeping in a warm bed and eating 3 meals a day, and my daughter taught him to play checkers." Eli was sobbing. The girl, Sadie, pressed against his side with both arms around his waist. She looked up at Caleb with eyes that were too old for her face. "Are we going away from here?" "Yeah, sweetheart. You're all going away from here." "Promise?" "I promise." "People promise things and then they don't do them." "I know, but I'm doing this one." Agnes arrived 2 hours later with a wagon and enough medical supplies to treat an army. She'd recruited 3 women from town to help, including Clara, who'd left Rosie and Noah in Reverend Calloway's care. Agnes moved through the children with quiet efficiency, examining each one, documenting injuries, making notes in a hand that stayed steady even when her jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. 17 children, she told Caleb when she'd finished. Oldest is 14, youngest is 6. All malnourished, all showing signs of physical abuse. Several have untreated fractures. One boy has a lung infection that would have killed him inside a month. And the graves? Agnes's face went hard. "We found them, behind the refuse pile on the north slope. I counted 9. Prescott's men are digging now." 9. 9 children buried in unmarked graves. 9 lives ended in darkness and silence, and forgotten by a world that should have protected them. Names? We won't know until we excavate, but Noah's ledgers should tell us. Agnes paused. "Caleb, the ledgers. They found them. Shaft 7, just where Noah said. 6 years of records. Names, dates, causes of death." Slade kept meticulous accounts, like he was running a business, because to him, that's exactly what it was. Caleb walked away from her, walked to the edge of the camp, and stood there looking at the mountains and breathing until the rage subsided enough that he could think. Behind him, he could hear children crying, deputies moving through the camp, Agnes giving orders in her steady, unbreakable voice. He found Eli sitting against a supply shed, with Sadie asleep in his lap. The boy had stopped crying, but his face was ravaged by it. The wooden horse was clutched in his fist. Eli. Yeah? We're going to take you to your brother now. You and Sadie and all the other kids. We've got wagons, we've got food and blankets. It's a long ride, but you'll be warm. What about Slade? Slade's going to Denver in chains. He'll get out. Men like him always get out. Not this time. Eli looked up at him. You don't know that. I know that there's a federal marshal, a doctor, a reverend, and a whole town full of people who are going to make sure he never touches another child. I know there's 9 graves behind this camp that are going to need explaining. And I know there's 6 years of records in his own handwriting that prove everything he did. That's evidence. Evidence doesn't always win. No, but it helps. And so does having a 13-year-old boy and 22 other children willing to stand up and tell the truth. Eli's jaw set. The same stubborn line Caleb had seen in Noah. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. Every kid who died, every beating, every day in the hole. I'll tell them until they can't pretend they don't know. That's what I was counting on. The convoy left the mine at noon. 2 wagons full of children, bundled in every blanket Agnes and Clara could find. Prescott and his deputies rode escort, with Slade in the back of a prison wagon, his wrists and ankles chained. He'd stopped talking. Stopped threatening. He sat in the wagon bed and stared at nothing, with the empty eyes of a man who'd finally realized the game was over. Caleb rode beside the children's wagon. Eli sat up front with Sadie in his lap. The girl was awake now, eating a biscuit Clara had given her, with the same careful deliberation Noah used. Small bites, slow, like she was rationing hope. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. Caleb? Eli's voice was careful. What's Noah like now? Is he different? Different how? When I knew him, he didn't talk much, didn't trust anybody, didn't smile. I used to tell him stories at night to make him feel safe. But I could tell he was always listening for footsteps, always ready to run. He's still like that, some. He doesn't sleep well. He flinches at loud noises. He eats like every meal might be his last. Caleb paused. But he laughed yesterday. My daughter told a joke about a chicken, and he laughed. First time I'd heard it. Eli closed his eyes. He used to laugh all the time. Before, when Mama was alive, he'd laugh at anything. Bugs, clouds, the way the cat sneezed. I thought I'd never hear it again. You'll hear it. What's your daughter like? Rosie? She's 7. She's bossy and she talks too much, and she thinks every animal on earth is her personal responsibility. She decided Noah was her brother about 30 seconds after she met him. Is he? Getting there. Eli went quiet for a while. Sadie had fallen asleep again, her head against his chest. He held her the way Noah held Rosie's hand. Like letting go meant losing everything. Caleb. Yeah? Noah told you about Sadie? He said you take care of her. Her parents are dead. Both of them. Slade picked her up outside of Pueblo 8 months ago. She was wandering on the road, barefoot. Didn't even know her last name. Eli's arm tightened around the sleeping girl. First night in the camp, Slade put her in the narrowest tunnel. She screamed for 6 hours. Nobody could get to her. When they finally pulled her out, she wouldn't talk for 3 weeks. She's talking now. Took a while. I carried her everywhere, fed her, kept her close. Eventually, she started whispering to me at night, then words, then sentences. Eli looked down at her. She calls me Big Brother. You are her big brother. She needs a real family, not a kid who can barely take care of himself. She's got one, if you want it. Eli's head came up. What do you mean? I mean my ranch has a loft big enough for 4 kids. I mean I've got chickens that make eggs every day, and a dog that sleeps on your feet. I mean my daughter's been asking for a bigger family since she was old enough to know what the word meant. You'd take Sadie too? I'd take all of you, if that's what you want. Eli stared at him. Caleb watched the calculation run. The same one Noah always ran. Is this real? What's the catch? When does the kindness stop? Why? Eli asked.
You don't owe us anything. I owe your brother everything. He reminded me what it means to give a damn about something. I've been sleepwalking through my life for 5 years, just going through the motions, keeping my head down, not caring about anything except getting through another day. Noah woke me up. By being broken? By being brave. Same as you. The wagons rolled on through the snow. The sun climbed and began its descent. Behind them, the mine grew smaller until it disappeared behind a ridge, just another scar on the mountain that would heal in time. They reached Burden Creek at dusk. The whole town had turned out. People lining the street, silent at first, watching the wagons roll in. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole street erupted. Clara was there. Reverend Calloway. Morrison from the store. Miss Hayes, the school teacher. Lahi from the saloon. Dozens of people Caleb barely knew, all standing in the snow, all clapping, some crying. But Caleb was looking for only 2 faces. He found them on Clara's porch. Noah stood rigid, gripping the railing with both hands, his eyes scanning the wagon. Rosie was beside him, bouncing on her toes. The wagon stopped. Caleb helped Eli down. The boy's legs were shaking. Sadie clung to his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. Noah came off the porch. Slow at first, then faster, then running through the snow with his arms out and his face wide open, every wall he'd built crumbling to nothing. The brothers collided in the middle of the street. They went down in the snow, holding each other, and the sound Eli made when he wrapped his arms around Noah was the sound of a boy letting go of 4 years of grief and terror and guilt. A sound that wasn't crying and wasn't laughing, but something in between that had no name because the language hadn't been invented for it. "You're alive," Eli kept saying. "You're alive! You're alive!" "I told you I'd come back for you." Noah was sobbing into his brother's coat. "I promised." "You didn't come back. You sent someone better." Noah pulled back and looked at his brother's face, at the swollen eye, the cut lip, the bruises layered on bruises. "He hurt you." "I'm okay." "He hurt you because of me." "He hurt me because he's a monster, not because of you. Never because of you." Eli held Noah's face in both hands. "You got out. That's all I ever wanted. You got out." Rosie had followed Noah off the porch. She stood a few feet away, watching the brothers with tears streaming down her face. Then she walked forward and put her hand on Eli's shoulder. "Hi, I'm Rosie. I'm Noah's sister now, which makes me your sister too. And that's Sadie on your back, and Daddy says she can stay with us too. So we're a family. All of us." Eli looked at this small, fierce girl with her red-brown curls and her mother's gray eyes and her absolute certainty that love was something you decided, not something you earned. "Just like that?" he whispered. "Just like that." Caleb stood by the wagon, watching his family take shape in the middle of a snow-covered street, while a whole town watched and wept. 4 children. 4 broken, brave, impossible children who'd found each other through tragedy and stubbornness and the kind of luck that only comes when someone decides to do the right thing at the exact moment it costs them everything. Agnes appeared at his elbow. "You know the hearing's still set for tomorrow." "I know." "Slade's lawyer filed an emergency motion. Harlan's furious. Says Prescott overstepped his authority." "Prescott had a federal warrant." "Harlan doesn't care. He's saying the warrant was obtained improperly. He's threatening to release Slade on a technicality." The joy drained out of Caleb's chest. "Can he do that?" "He can try. But Caleb, we've got the ledgers. We've got the photographs Agnes took of the children. We've got 9 graves. We've got 17 living witnesses and a federal marshal who's not going to back down. And Harlan's got pride and connections and 20 years on the bench. Then we'd better be ready to fight for every inch." Caleb looked at the children. At Noah and Eli, still holding each other in the snow. At Rosie, kneeling beside them, with Sadie in her lap, the little girl's face pressed against Rosie's coat. At all the other children being led into Clara's boarding house, and Doc Whitfield's office, and the church, and every home in town that had opened its doors. "Agnes." "Yeah?" "How much ammunition does the truth need before it can't be ignored?" "More than you'd think. Less than Slade's got." She squeezed his arm. "Get some sleep, Caleb. Tomorrow's going to be the longest day of your life." He gathered his children, all 4 of them, loaded them into the wagon, wrapped them in blankets, and drove home through the dark. Nobody spoke. Eli held Noah. Rosie held Sadie. Biscuit sat in the back, his tail thumping against the wagon bed. At the cabin, Caleb carried Sadie inside. She was light as a bird. He laid her in the loft beside Rosie. Eli and Noah climbed up together, and Caleb heard them whispering in the dark. The sounds of brothers catching up on 4 years of lost time. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd eaten alone for 5 years, where he'd sat in the dark, drinking whiskey and talking to Martha's ghost. Tonight it felt different. The cabin felt different. Full. Alive. The way it had felt when Martha was here, before the consumption took her, before the silence moved in and stayed. "Martha," he said quietly, "I've got 4 kids now. You'd laugh at me. I can barely make breakfast for 2. He thought he heard her. Not really. Not her voice. But the feeling of her. The warmth she carried with her everywhere, even at the end, even when the fever had taken everything else. He checked the rifle, checked the revolver, checked the locks and windows, and the new bolt he'd put on the door after the barn fire. Tomorrow, he'd stand in a courtroom and fight for the right to keep these children. Fight a judge who didn't like being wrong. Fight a system that had failed 26 kids for 6 years. He didn't know if he'd win, but he knew every person who'd stood in that street tonight, clapping and crying, would be in that courtroom tomorrow. He knew Agnes would bring her evidence, and Calloway would bring his conviction, and Clara would bring her shotgun temper. He knew Prescott would stand with a federal badge and 9 graves worth of truth. And he knew 4 children were sleeping in his loft, breathing softly, safe for the first time in years. 4 children who trusted him. 4 children who called this place home. That was worth any courtroom, any judge, any fight. Caleb laid his head on the table and closed his eyes. And for the first time in 5 years, he slept without dreaming of the dead. The courtroom was full before Caleb even reached the steps. He'd dressed in his Navy suit, the one he'd married Martha in, the one he'd worn to her funeral. The fabric smelled like cedar and 5 years of grief. His hands shook as he buttoned the collar, not from fear, from the weight of everything riding on the next few hours. Rosie had insisted on wearing the red ribbon he'd bought her at Morrison's store, the one from that first morning in Burden Creek, the morning everything changed. She tied it in her hair and looked up at him with Martha's eyes. "We're going to win, Daddy." "That's the plan." "Plans don't always work." "This one will." "How do you know?" "Because you tied your lucky ribbon." She almost smiled. Almost. Noah and Eli walked behind Caleb, shoulder to shoulder. Noah had gained enough weight that his clothes fit now. Eli still limped, still held his left arm close to his body where the ribs hadn't healed right. Sadie held Eli's hand, silent, her dark eyes taking in the crowd with the watchful stillness of a child who'd learned that large groups of adults usually meant something bad was about to happen. Clara met them at the courthouse door. "Whole town's in there. People standing in the aisles. Morrison had to bring extra chairs from the saloon. Slade's lawyer? Already inside, looking like he swallowed a lemon. But Caleb." Clara gripped his arm. "Harlan's here. Came in from Denver last night. He's sitting in for the hearing." "Harlan? Not the local judge." Harlan pulled rank. "Says this falls under his original jurisdiction, since he signed the guardianship papers." Caleb's gut tightened. Judge Harlan. The man who'd signed Slade's papers 3 years ago. The man who'd given legal cover to a slave operation. If Harlan was running this hearing, everything they'd built could collapse. "Where's Prescott?" "Inside. He's not happy either." They walked in. The noise hit Caleb first, 100 voices talking at once, the sound bouncing off the high ceiling and the brick walls. Then the crowd saw them, and the noise died. People turning, staring, making room. Some reached out to touch Caleb's arm, to pat Noah's shoulder, to smile at Rosie. Strangers who'd become allies overnight. Slade sat at the plaintiff's table in prison clothes. His hands were cuffed to a chain around his waist. The smooth mask was back in place, but something underneath it was different. Smaller. The confidence of a man who'd always controlled the room, reduced to the calculation of a man who knew the room had turned against him. His lawyer, Leland Cross, sat beside him. Cross looked like he hadn't slept. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were red. Whatever this job was paying him, it wasn't enough for what he'd seen at that mine. Samuel Graves stood as Caleb approached the defense table. The old lawyer had arrived from Denver 2 days ago, summoned by Agnes's letter. He was 70 years old, thin as a fence post, with a voice that could fill a canyon and eyes that missed nothing. "How bad is it?" Caleb asked. "Harlan's a problem. He's protecting himself as much as Slade. If he rules those guardianship papers were valid, it means he didn't make a mistake. Judges hate admitting mistakes. Can we win? We can if the evidence speaks louder than his ego. Sit down. We're about to find out." The clerk called the room to order. Judge Harlan entered through the back door. Mid-60s, silver hair. The face of a man who'd spent 40 years believing he was always right and saw no reason to start doubting now. He settled behind the bench and looked at the courtroom. His eyes stopped on the children, on Noah and Eli in their second-hand clothes, on Sadie gripping Eli's hand, on Rosie with her red ribbon and her fierce chin. "This hearing concerns the custody of the minor Noah Ward," Harlan began. "Mr. Slade holds guardianship papers signed by this court. Mr. Mackenzie contests those papers and petitions for custody. Additionally, the federal marshal has filed charges against Mr. Slade." He turned to Prescott. "Marshal, I want to address the warrant issue first. You obtained a federal warrant from Judge Crawford to raid Mr. Slade's operation. I'm questioning the basis for that warrant." Prescott stood. "Your Honor, the warrant was based on sworn testimony from Noah Ward, a medical report from Dr. Agnes Whitfield documenting systematic abuse, and photographic evidence of children being held in forced labor conditions. Judge Crawford had no jurisdiction over a state guardianship matter. With respect, Your Honor, forced labor of minors is a federal crime, regardless of state guardianship arrangements. The warrant was properly obtained." "That's for me to determine, Marshal." Harlan's voice was ice. "If I find the warrant was improper, everything obtained under it, the records, the photographs, the testimony of the children, all of it becomes inadmissible." The courtroom stirred. Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. Harlan was going to throw out their evidence. Every ledger, every photograph, every scar documented on every child. All of it. Graves stood. "Your Honor, if I may." "Go ahead, Mr. Graves." "Before we debate the warrant, I'd ask the court to hear testimony from the children themselves. Their words are not derived from the warrant. Their experiences are not evidence seized by the marshal. They're human beings with stories to tell. Whatever Your Honor decides about the warrant, you cannot silence them." Harlan's jaw worked. "I'll allow testimony, but I'm reserving judgment on the admissibility of physical evidence." "Thank you, Your Honor." Graves turned. "I call Eli Ward." Eli stood. His legs were steady, but his hands were fists. He walked to the witness stand and sat down. The clerk held out the Bible. Eli placed his hand on it and swore to tell the truth in a voice that didn't waver. Graves approached gently. "Eli, how old are you?" 13. "How long were you at Mr. Slade's mine?" 4 years, since I was 9. "Tell the judge what happened there." Eli looked at Harlan, straight at him, not at the bench or the gavel or the robes, at the man. "We worked underground, 12, 14 hours a day. The little ones went into the narrow shafts because they were the only ones who could fit. Some of those tunnels were so tight you had to crawl on your belly. If the shaft collapsed, you either dug yourself out or you died. 3 kids died that way while I was there." "Did Mr. Slade provide medical care?" "No, sir. If you got hurt, you worked through it. If you couldn't work, you didn't eat. If you complained, you went in the hole." "Describe the hole." "A pit in the ground, 6 feet deep, 4 feet across. They'd throw you in and put a grate over the top. Snow and rain came right through. No food, no water. Longest I was in there was 3 days." "Why were you put in the hole?" "Because I asked for water. Because I dropped a tool. Because I looked at Slade wrong." Eli's voice hardened. "Because I existed and he could." "Did children die at the mine?" "Yes, sir. I can name them." Eli took a breath. "Thomas. He was 10. Tunnel collapse. Slade didn't dig him out for 6 hours. He suffocated. Mary. She was 8. Pneumonia. Slade said she was faking. She died in her sleep. James. He was 12. Slade beat him for stealing food. Beat him so bad he couldn't walk. He died 2 days later." Eli's voice stayed level, flat. The voice of someone reciting facts that had happened to someone else, because feeling them would break him apart. "How many in total?" 9 that I know of. Could be more from before I got there." Cross stood. "Objection! The witness is speculating. The witness is testifying about what he personally observed," Graves said. "Your Honor, this boy spent 4 years in that mine.
He has the right to tell you what he saw." "Overruled. Continue." Graves stepped closer to Eli. "Tell the judge about Sadie." Eli's composure cracked. Just a little. Just around the edges. "Sadie was 6 when they brought her in. She was so small. She didn't understand what was happening. They put her in the narrowest shaft on her first day. She screamed for hours. Nobody could get to her because the shaft was too tight for anyone bigger." "Who took care of her?" "I did. She was the same age my brother was when they took us. I couldn't protect Noah. He got away, and I thought he was dead for 3 months. Slade told me he'd caught him and killed him. Told me it was my fault for helping him escape." Eli's jaw set. "I wasn't going to let that happen to Sadie." "Is Sadie in this courtroom?" "She's right there." Eli pointed to where Sadie sat in Rosie's lap. Rosie had her arms around the smaller girl, holding her the way Eli used to. "She's 7 now. She still won't talk to adults, only talks to me and Rosie." Graves turned to the judge. "No further questions." Cross stood. He looked at Slade. Slade nodded. Cross approached Eli with the reluctance of a man walking toward something he didn't want to touch. "Mr. Ward, isn't it true that Mr. Slade provided you with food and shelter?" "He provided slop that pigs wouldn't eat, and a tent with no heat in the middle of winter." "But he did provide it." "A prison provides food and shelter too. That doesn't make it charity." "Mr. Ward, you're 13 years old. Is it possible you're exaggerating the conditions because you're angry about being disciplined?" Eli pulled up his shirt. The courtroom gasped. His torso was a map of violence. Scars crossing scars. Bruises in every shade from fresh purple to old yellow. The outline of ribs that had broken and healed wrong. "Does this look like discipline to you?" Cross turned away. He didn't ask another question. He walked back to his table and sat down and didn't look at Slade. Graves called Noah next. The boy walked to the stand with Rosie squeezing his hand until the last possible second. "You'll be great," she whispered. Noah sat down. He looked small in the witness chair, small and thin and young. But his eyes were clear. "Noah, you've heard your brother's testimony. Is it accurate?" "Every word." "Is there anything you want to add?" Noah looked at Judge Harlan. "Your Honor, you signed the papers that gave Mr. Slade permission to take us. I don't know if you knew what he was doing. Maybe you didn't. Maybe he lied to you the same way he lied to us. But you know now. You've heard what happened. You've seen what he did to my brother. You know about the children who died." The courtroom was silent. "I'm 9 years old. I can't make you do anything. I can't force you to care. But I'm asking you. Please don't send us back. Please don't let those papers matter more than our lives." Harlan stared at the boy. Something moved across his face. Something that might have been shame. "I'm not asking for pity," Noah continued. "I'm asking for justice. Real justice. The kind that protects kids instead of the men who hurt them." "Thank you, Mr. Ward." Harlan's voice was rough. "You may step down." Graves called Agnes next. She delivered the medical evidence with surgical precision. 37 lash marks on Noah's back. Cracked ribs on both boys. Strangulation bruises. Burns. Malnutrition. The injuries on all 17 children, documented and cataloged. She spoke for 20 minutes, and the courtroom listened in horrified silence. Then Graves called Caleb. He walked to the stand and sat down, looked out at the packed room, found Rosie's face, found Noah's, found Eli's, found Sadie asleep in Clara's arms. "Mr. Mackenzie, why did you take Noah Ward into your home?" "Because my daughter asked me to. And because when I looked at that boy, I saw every person I'd ever failed to help. My sister Annabelle, sold by my father when she was 10. My friend Thomas bled out at Antietam while I held him. My wife Martha, dying while I watched and couldn't do a damn thing. His voice cracked. I spent 5 years after Martha died just surviving. Not living, not caring, just getting through each day. Noah woke me up. He reminded me that there are things worth fighting for. What would you do if this court ruled against you? I'd fight it. Every legal option, every appeal, every avenue available to me. And if all legal options were exhausted? Caleb looked at Harlan. Then I'd do what any father would do. I'd protect my children, whatever it takes, even if it meant breaking the law? Your Honor, I stood at Antietam and watched boys younger than Eli die for the idea that no human being should be another man's property. If following the law means sending children back to slavery, then the law is wrong, and I won't follow it. Harlan leaned back in his chair. The courtroom waited. Cross didn't cross-examine. He sat at his table with his head in his hands and said nothing. Graves rested his case. Harlan called a recess. 30 minutes. The longest 30 minutes of Caleb's life. The children gathered around him. Rosie climbed into his lap. Noah stood at his shoulder. Eli sat beside him, with Sadie curled against his chest. Clara brought water. Agnes paced. Calloway prayed quietly in the corner. "Daddy, what if he says no?" Rosie whispered. "Then we keep fighting." "What if fighting doesn't work?" "Then we fight harder." Noah put his hand on Caleb's shoulder. "Whatever happens, you gave us this, these weeks, this family. Nobody can take that away." Eli nodded. "He's right. Even if the worst happens, we had this. That's more than we ever had before." Caleb pulled them close. All 4 of them. His children. The ones he'd chosen and the ones who'd chosen him. Whatever Harlan decided in the next 30 minutes, this was real. This was family. And it couldn't be unsigned by any judge. The clerk called them back. The courtroom filled. Harlan took the bench. "I've considered the testimony presented today," Harlan began. "I've reviewed the medical evidence. I've heard from the children themselves. And I've spent the last 30 minutes doing something I should have done 3 years ago. Examining my own conscience." The room went still. 3 years ago, Mordecai Slade came before me with paperwork and a persuasive story about helping orphaned children. I signed guardianship papers without adequate investigation. I took a man at his word when I should have looked deeper. That failure is mine, and I will carry it for the rest of my life. Harlan's voice shook, just slightly, just enough to be human. I cannot undo what happened to those children. I cannot bring back the 9 who died. I cannot give Noah Ward and Eli Ward and Sadie and all the others their childhoods back. The law does not have that power. No court does. He paused, looked at Slade. But I can do this. I hereby void all guardianship papers signed by this court pertaining to Mordecai Slade. Every single one. They were obtained through fraud, executed in furtherance of criminal activity, and represent the most egregious abuse of the legal system I have witnessed in 40 years on the bench. Slade lunged to his feet. "You can't—" "Sit down, Mr. Slade, or I will have you gagged." Cross pulled Slade back into his chair. "Furthermore, I am granting Jesse McKenzie's petition for permanent custody of Noah Ward." Harlan looked at Caleb. "And based on testimony heard today, I am extending that custody to include Eli Ward and the minor child known as Sadie, whose full legal name we will establish through proper proceedings." Rosie screamed. A pure,
joyful, 7-year-old scream that bounced off every wall in the courtroom. She threw her arms around Noah, and Noah threw his arms around Eli, and Eli reached for Sadie. And all four of them ended up on the floor in a pile of tears and laughter and the kind of noise that only happens when grief finally breaks and lets joy through. Harlan waited for the room to quiet. It took a while. Mr. Slade, regarding the federal charges, I am upholding Marshal Prescott's warrant in full. The evidence seized at your operation is admissible. The children's testimony is on record, and the 9 graves found on your property will be excavated and investigated by federal authorities. I want an appeal, Slade said. His voice was flat. Dead. That is your right.
But you'll be making that appeal from a cell. Marshal Prescott, Harlan turned to the federal officer. Please remove Mr. Slade from my courtroom. I don't want to look at him anymore. Prescott's deputies took Slade out. The man walked between them in chains, his head down, his smooth mask finally gone. What was underneath wasn't rage anymore. It was nothing. The emptiness of a man who'd built his life on cruelty and control and discovered that both had expiration dates. As Slade passed Caleb's table, he stopped, looked at Noah. The boy met his eyes without flinching. You ruined me, Slade said. No, sir. Noah's voice was quiet, steady. You ruined yourself. I just told the truth. They took Slade away. The courtroom erupted, people on their feet, clapping, crying, reaching for Caleb and the children. Clara was sobbing into her apron. Agnes stood by the window with tears on her cheeks, trying to maintain her professional composure and failing completely. Calloway had his arms raised to the ceiling, thanking a God he'd never stopped believing in, even when the evidence was thin. Caleb stood in the middle of it all, holding his children, feeling the noise and the love and the chaos wash over him like a river breaking through a dam. 5 years of silence. 5 years of grief. 5 years of an empty cabin and a cold bed, and conversations with a ghost who couldn't answer back. Over now. All of it. Over. They walked out of the courthouse into the December afternoon. The sun was out for the first time in weeks. The snow sparkled. People lined the steps, reaching out, shaking Caleb's hand, touching the children's shoulders, saying things that blurred together into one long, warm, unbroken sound of welcome. The wagon ride home was loud. Rosie talked the entire way, planning Christmas, assigning chores, explaining to Sadie which chicken was the friendliest, and which horse would let you braid its mane. Noah and Eli sat close together, shoulders touching, not talking much, but not needing to. Sadie sat in Rosie's lap and said one word the entire trip. Home? Yeah, Rosie said. Home. The cabin came into view as the sun dipped toward the mountains. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop and sat there for a minute, just looking. The same cabin he'd built with his own hands. The same porch where he'd sat alone for 5 years. The same door Martha had walked through 1,000 times. But it looked different now. Bigger. Brighter. Like the building itself had been waiting for enough people to fill it. Everybody out, Caleb said. Chores don't do themselves. They scattered. Rosie dragged Sadie to meet the chickens. Noah went to feed the horses. Eli stood in the yard, turning slowly, taking it all in. Eli. Yeah? Welcome home, son. Eli's jaw worked. He blinked hard. I don't know how to do this. Normal life. Family. I don't know how any of it works. Neither do I. My biscuits are terrible, and I've been wearing the same 2 shirts for 5 years. We'll figure it out together. What if I mess up? You will. So will I. So will Rosie. That's how families work. That's simple?
Nothing about it is simple, but it's worth it. Eli nodded. He looked at the cabin, at the horses, at Rosie chasing a chicken while Sadie watched from behind a fence post, at Noah pumping water with arms that were getting stronger every day, at the old hound dog wadding across the yard to investigate the new people.
Caleb,
Yeah?
Sadie's going to need a lot of help. She doesn't sleep through the night. She screams when she has bad dreams. She won't eat if there's a loud noise at the table.
Then we'll be quiet at the table.
She's scared of the dark.
We'll leave a lamp on.
She might never be normal.
Who is? Caleb put his hand on Eli's shoulder. She's got 4 people who love her now. That's a start. The rest we'll figure out as we go. Biscuit reached Eli and sat down at his feet, looked up with his droopy eyes, and thumped his tail once against the frozen ground. Eli reached down and scratched the dog's ears. Noah said you were a good dog. Biscuit thumped his tail again. He was right. That night, Caleb cooked supper for 5, burned the biscuits, set off the smoke. Rosie announced to the table that Daddy's cooking was the real emergency and they should send for Clara immediately. Noah laughed. Actually laughed. The sound filled the cabin and Eli's head snapped toward his brother, his face crumbling at the edges because he hadn't heard that sound in 4 years and had believed he'd never hear it again. Sadie ate a whole plate, small bites, slow, but she finished it. When she was done, she pushed her plate forward and whispered something. Eli leaned down. She wants to know if there's more. There's always more, Caleb said. Every night, for the rest of your life. After supper, Rosie read aloud from her horsebook while Eli and Noah played checkers with bottle caps on the board Caleb had carved. Sadie sat on the floor with Biscuit's head in her lap, running her fingers through his fur over and over. The dog didn't move, didn't even snore, like he understood that this small, silent girl needed him to be still. Caleb washed dishes and listened, to the sound of pages turning, to bottle caps clicking on wood, to the fire popping and the wind outside, and Biscuit's breathing, and his children's voices weaving together in the warm air. This was what Martha had wanted. Not the grief and the silence and the whiskey and the long, empty years. This. Noise. Life. A cabin full of people who needed each other. He dried his hands and walked to the porch. The stars were out. Millions of them, sharp and bright against the black Colorado sky. The air was cold enough to hurt. The door opened behind him. Footsteps. Not 1 set. 4. Noah came first, then Eli, then Rosie, carrying Sadie on her hip, staggering under the weight. "We want to look at the stars," Rosie announced. "All of us." They spread blankets on the frozen porch and lay down together. 5 people and a fat old dog under a sky that went on forever. Rosie pointed out constellations and made up names for the ones she didn't know. Noah whispered questions about the universe that nobody could answer. Eli lay with his arm around Sadie, who was looking up with her mouth open, seeing the sky without a grate over it for the first time in 8 months. "Caleb." Noah's voice, quiet in the dark. "Yeah? Do you think Mama can see us? From wherever she is?" Caleb thought about Martha, about 5 years of missing her, about all the nights he'd sat on this same porch and talked to her ghost and gotten nothing back but silence and stars. "Yeah," he said. "I think she can." "What do you think she'd say?" "She'd say it took me long enough." Eli laughed softly. Rosie giggled. Even Sadie made a sound that might have been the beginning of something. "Caleb?" Eli this time. "Yeah, son?" "Thank you for coming to get us, for fighting when it would have been easier to walk away, for everything." "You don't have to thank me." "Yeah, I do, because for 4 years nobody came, nobody fought, Nobody even looked. And then you did. You showed up with a bad leg and a rifle and a 7-year-old girl, and you changed everything. Rosie changed everything. I just drove the wagon. Daddy, Rosie's voice was heavy with sleep. You did more than drive the wagon. Go to sleep, Rosie girl. You saved them, Daddy. They saved me right back. One by one, the children fell asleep. Rosie first, curled against Caleb's side. Then Sadie, tucked into Eli. Then Noah, his hand resting on Biscuit's back. Eli was last, fighting it, the old habit of staying awake to keep watch. But eventually, his eyes closed too.
Caleb lay there under the stars, with his family breathing around him. 4 children who'd been thrown away by a world that should have held them close. 4 children who'd survived things no child should know existed. 4 children who'd found each other and him and decided, together, that they were worth fighting for. He thought about Martha, about Annabelle, about Thomas bleeding out at Antietam, about all the people he couldn't save and the ones he finally did. About a question Rosie had asked in a snow-covered market square that had broken his life wide open and rebuilt it into something better. Daddy, can we take him home? Yes. The answer was always going to be yes. Caleb closed his eyes. The wind moved through the prairie grass. The stars turned overhead. The dog snored. The children breathed. And in a cabin on a Colorado ranch, in the winter of 1887, a family that had no business existing slept together under a sky full of light, whole and unbroken and built from nothing but stubbornness and love. That was enough. That was everything.